And now here is Pastor Arnold Murray.
Good day to you. God bless you. Say welcome to the Shepherd's Chapel. Welcome to this family Bible study hour. We're ready to get back into a new book today. We're going into what from the King James would be known as the second book of Kings, but it's commonly called the fourth book of Kings, in as much as the books of Samuel 1 and 2 are usually called Kings 1 and 2, and of the King James 3 and 4. So not to confuse anyone, but yet if you happen to have a Bible other than the King James, it could be titled Fourth Kings, no problem. That's the one we're going to do. So we still bear in mind that Israel and Judah are now split. They will never go back together until Yeshua returns, as it is written in Ezekiel 37. And however, at the hour we'll be picking up in the closing hours of the last book, they were united as far as fighting with each other in battle as they fought Syria, and you were aware, with Ahab and Jehoshaphat. So, that being said, let's pick it up. Ahab has died, as God predicted he would. And here we go with it. Chapter 1 and verse 1. 2 Kings, it reads, Then Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab. Now you'll remember that David conquered Moab, which was Lot's son by his oldest daughter, therefore his name meaning of his father. That's what, when you, in the Hebrew tongue, that's what Moab means. And this is one of those beautiful things that the Moabite stone, which was discovered in, if my memory doesn't fail me, in the 1860s, and it has, in more than one language, it gives this same account of the same battle. I believe that in your companion Bible, if my memory doesn't fail me, it's Appendix 54. And if you make a side trip there for a special study, and I would recommend it, you will take note that in the Hebrew, on the Moabite stone, Yahweh is spelled correctly. Y-A-H-V-E-H, Yahweh. And it is amazing to me that the sacred name would be brought out so excellently on the Moabite stone, and yet so many scholars, and of course it isn't difficult to understand why the spelling is confused, is because there came a time that many of the scribes felt it was very dangerous to say the sacred name, because to take it in vain was death, just like that. So they would rather not say it. Be that as it may, another subject for another time. But you will note that when you cover Appendix 54. If it isn't 54, you can go to your lead page, and it'll identify the Moabite stone for you, and it gives you the translation. I find it very interesting. Okay, so Moab, the Moabites, after Ahab died, they had been beaten severely by the Syrians rather, and Moab probably thought they're weak now and scattered. Moab's dead. Now's a good time to hit them. All right, verse 2. And Ahaziah fell down through a lattice in his upper chamber that was in Samaria, and was sick. And he sent messengers and said unto them, listen carefully now, this is now the new replacement king of Israel. But you'll remember in the closing verses of the first book of Kings, he was about as bad as they come as far as idol worship or chasing after other gods were concerned, because he took on the habits of not only Jeroboam, but the mother and so on, which means idol worship. It means that he worshiped the calf worship and so forth. Go inquire, this is it, go inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, whither I shall recover of this disease. I mean, he had turned so far away from truth that he goes Beelzebub is the word. It's the scribes have had fun with it. It means Lord of the flies, or a lord that was a fly. Certain scribes later, not liking this, turned it to Lord of the dunghill, but it does mean Lord of the flies. All right, but it certainly is an idol. And it has to do with the Nile and the time of the year of spring coming in. The flies would come, and the gnats, it can even be translated gnat, and would cover things. But the people feeling that he had something to do with the bringing of spring and prosperity of fruits. But he said, go down there and ask him if I'm going to die or not. What did he fall through? That means he fell through a lattice work, which was probably a window. He was probably on one of his drug trips in his fake religion, so naturally he would go to an idol to ask about his welfare. Verse 3, and the angel of the Lord said to Elijah, the Tishbite, arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, that'd be the king of Israel, and say unto them, is it not because there is not a God in Israel that you do go to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Is that what you're up to? Don't you think Israel has a God? And of course the angel of the God is God's own spokesman to the prophet of prophets Elijah. Verse 4. Now therefore, thus saith the Lord, thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone up, but shalt surely die. And Elijah departed. In other words, he will receive the rightful death. When you play, you pay, get drunk and fall out of a window, and when you're supposed to be the king of Israel, the protector of the faith, and so forth. 5. And when the messengers turned back unto him, he said unto them, why are ye now turned back? Verse 6, and they said unto him, there came a man. They didn't even know who it was. But it was impressive enough that they turned around and went back when Elijah told them anyway. They said unto him, there came a man up to meet us, and said unto us, go turn again unto the king that sent you, and say unto him, thus saith the Lord, it is not because there is it not because there is not a God in Israel, that thou sendest to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone up, but shalt surely die. Now, there is one thing. When you worship idols and get so involved in the world, you don't have any fear for God. You would think that God could even be persuaded perhaps that God was just a superstition of some very religious people. That can be very dangerous. So that's about the condition that this king's mind is in. So what does he do? Verse 7, and he said unto them, what manner of man was he which came up to meet you and told you these words? I'm sure he's not too happy that they turned and came back by a man they didn't even recognize. Verse 8, and they answered him, he was an hairy man. Now this didn't mean he was hairy, it meant his dress was hairy, like the old camel hair or lamb hair rough garment that prophets wore, and girt with a girdle of leather about his loins. And he said, the king said, it is Elijah the Tishbite. Now, it was normal that a girdle at this time was usually of fine linen, rather expensive, but prophets wore leather girdles, leather belts, all right? And here he knows that it was Elijah because of the description. Verse 9. And then the king sent unto him a captain of 50 with his 50. And he went up to him, and behold, he sat on the top of an hill. I mean, I want you to visualize this. And if I may, I'm going to read with the force, or irony that the captain will speak, or you're not going to understand the Hebrew, okay? He saw Elijah sitting up on this hill, and he spake unto him, Thou man of God, the king hath said, Come down. I mean, it wasn't nice. Now, a king does not tell a man of God what to do. All right? Because inasmuch as it was God that had given Elijah the message, it was God that he was telling, in a sense, and ordering down. And therefore, Elijah will begin to instill within the minds of these people a little bit of fear for the Lord. Verse 10. And Elijah answered and said to the captain of 50, If I be a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50. And there came down fire from heaven and consumed him and his 50. Now, you mean you think this actually happened? Of course it did. One good bolt, God is a consuming fire. And when you have messed up as bad as this one in position, he wasn't just a layperson. He was the king's son of Israel. He had responsibilities as protector of the faith. And that responsibility, do you realize that for the king line, even that went north, and those that are receive their coronation on the coronation chair, the Moabite stone, the coronation stone, Jacob's pillar, that the first issue and command and order is still protector of the faith. It's even to this day. And so he had failed in all these things. He was a poor, miserable slob. He wasn't just a wet noodle that would, as Ahab, his father, that would roll with the punches. He was a slob. And there needed to be some recognition and respect built back in for our father. This is the way he chose to do it. Verse 11. Again, also, he sent unto him another captain of 50 with his 50. Hadn't been impressed yet. And he answered and said unto him, and I will say this in his tone, he amplifies his problem. Listen to it. Oh, man of God. Or they didn't think he was anyway, but they're giving the title. Oh, man of God. Thus hath the king said, Come down and be quick about it, quickly. Now, again, that's no way to talk to a man of God. It's not, as you would think that after 50 of them, with a little jolt, had been just kind of consumed, that somebody would be getting the message. Well, let's check it out. Verse 12. And Elijah answered and said unto them, If I be a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50. And the fire of God came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. The irony that was in this captain's voice, he certainly, the first 50 hadn't impressed him at all. But sooner or later, there are many wimps that will say, well, why would God do that? God demands respect. And if a few must be lost in a situation of this where it has totally soured and gone to the dogs and they're worthless, miserable people indeed anyway, idol worshipers, mongers of everything that comes by, having turned their backs on God totally and completely, then this is what they deserve. Verse 13. And he sent again a captain of the third 50. This be 150 men sent out there plus their captain, with his 50. And the third captain of 50 went up. Now watch the difference. And came and fell on his knees before Elijah and besought him and said unto him, O man of God, I pray thee, let my life and the life of these 50 thy servants be precious in thy sight. In other words, we have a total different approach. We have respect. It was not Elijah that was looking for respect. It was God that, in other words, Elijah means my God is Yah. He was a representative of Yah. And here this man falls on his knees. He doesn't, you can see the type of man he is because he doesn't ask just for, he doesn't beg for himself or pray just for his own self. He prays for his 50 men. He feels responsible. 14. Behold, there came fire down from heaven and burned up the 2 captains of the former 50s with their 50s. Therefore, let my life now be precious in thy sight. And he knew that he was at the mercy of Elijah. And needless to say, that in itself shows respect. Verse 15. And the angel of the Lord said unto Elijah, Go down with him, be not afraid of him. And he arose and went down with him unto the king. In other words, God has promised Elijah, you've got safe passage. Don't worry, nothing's going to happen to you. In other words, God was taking pretty good care of Elijah. What can you learn from that today? As long as you use common sense and you have faith and you know that our Father is very real, that he is a reality. He's not just some force drifting around in space, that we are made in his image. We are his children. He wouldn't be much of a father if he didn't care about his children, especially those that he chooses to lead and to guide and that humble themselves before him and love him, return his love, and pay attention to his letter. Naturally, he's going to take care of his children, and Elijah was his child. 16. And he said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Forasmuch as thou hast sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, is it not because there is no God in Israel to inquire of this word question? Now, anyone knows that Yahweh, the living God, the creator of all things, has always been and will always be the God of those tribes and all the other children of this world, I hasten to add. Therefore, thou shalt not come down off that bed on which thou art gone up, but shalt surely die. And guess what? 17. So he died according to the word of the Lord with Elijah, which Elijah rather had spoken. And Jehoram reigned in his stead in the 2nd year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, because he had no son. Now, that's going to be a little bit confusing unless you recognize the fact that Jehoshaphat's son, Jehoram, is the king of Judah, but also the king of Israel, who would be the brother of Ahaziah, which he had no children, so his brother, who had the same name as the king of Judah. So if you don't understand that, that's going to read a little confusing to you. They both were given this same name, and what does it mean in the Hebrew tongue? Whom Yah has exalted. All right, we've got a king of Judah and a king of Israel, both named, whom Yah has exalted, Jehoram. Okay, verse 18. Now the rest of the acts of Ahaziah, which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Yes, and they're not good, all right? He was a slob coming out the gate, and unless he repented on his deathbed, he never repented. But be that as it may, God is judge. So what is our Father saying? I hope you can receive. There was about 100 men plus 202 men died just like that, plus the king, because they didn't know there was a God in Israel. Have to go off to some stick in the mud to find out. Let blowflies, go to the blowflies and let them answer you. That shows you about how much common sense some people have when they find themselves wandering in this world listlessly, wondering what their purpose and their destiny, wondering why I'm even here, when God sent them a letter explaining everything in detail, and they're too stupid or too proud or too stupid. I prefer stupid, to take time to understand our Father's letter. I know that offends some, but my purpose is to drive people into the Word of God so they can be and find love and purpose and destiny. And if you have to be a little upset at me for a while to find that, hey, it's worth it to me. Because I love you, but mainly our Father loves you. And it is pure stupidity not to take advantage of everything our Father has written to us, not only that will happen today, but that will happen tomorrow, whereby you can be mentally and spiritually prepared, is not taking advantage of the love our Father has placed on this earth for us in this generation. You don't have to wander around like a miserable lost pup. You're a child of God. You should act like it. So the lesson is, you better believe there is a God in heaven, because inasmuch, and the type would represent, inasmuch as when the millennium draws to a close, inasmuch as our Father is a consuming fire, there's going to be a lot of people going to take a walk into a lake of fire, and it's called the second death. Not quite as vicious as some might think. It simply means to not exist. So, as the 102 disappeared, so do those in the lake. Okay, different subject here. Let's get with it. It's time for Elijah to be relieved of command. He has been blessed, and let us learn from these events. Chapter 2, verse 1. And it came to pass, when the Lord would take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgad. Now, Elisha means God has salvation. You can partake in it if you like. He has it, but you have to ask, okay? In other words, Elijah is going to be taken up in a whirlwind. Well, what's that? What's a whirlwind? Well, it's that whirling object that was seen in Ezekiel's book, highly polished bronze, a very much vehicle, not a UFO. God knows exactly what it is, and that's a mode of transportation. There are no mysteries as far as God's word is concerned if you understand. Verse 2. And Elijah said unto Elisha, tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord hath sent me to Bethel, the house, Bethel being the house of God. And Elisha said unto him, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they went down to Bethel. Now what neither of these know, apparently, is that God has told both of them, this is the day I'm taking Elijah home. Elijah personally, son, I'm bringing you home. Elisha, this is the day you lose your teacher. This is the day you lose your spiritual father. He told both of them. And not only that, Elijah had, inasmuch as Jezebel had destroyed the prophets, or attempted to, Elijah had started 2 schools or more of prophets. And God is allowing him to go to these schools. What, to tell them goodbye? I don't know, but he had already informed the schools of prophets also that this was the day that Elijah would be called home. Not die, but called home. Verse 3, and the sons of the prophets that were at Bethel came forth to Elisha, and said unto him, knowest thou that the Lord will take away thy master from thy head today? Question. And he said, yea, I know it, hold your peace. He didn't want Elijah to know that he knew. Why? Because he wanted to go with Elijah. why would Elijah rather that he didn't go? Elijah, I feel, and this is my own opinion, I do not believe that he wanted this one that he loved so much to see Elijah glorified, for that might take away from Elisha's love of the Almighty. In other words, seeing Elijah glorified, by that being as Enoch was in the very beginning in Genesis, he walked with God to the point that he was too good for the world, and God just took him home. All right? That it might pull away from Elisha, that he might worship the glorified Elijah rather than Almighty God as he should. Could that be? I don't know. Think about it. Elijah was a very humble person. Verse 4, and Elijah said unto him, Elisha, tarry here. This is the second time. Tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho. And he said, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they came to Jericho. He allowed it. 5, and the sons of the prophets that were at Jericho came to Elisha and said unto him, knowest thou that the Lord will take away thy master from thy head today? Question. And he answered, yea, I know it. Hold ye your peace. So he keeps doing this, but it's obvious that God had spoken to all the prophets that day, letting them know. So now we go for the third time. Do you think Elisha will turn loose? No way. 6. And Elijah said unto him, tarry, I pray thee, here, for the Lord has sent me to Jordan. These are all the schools that Elijah has founded. And he said, as the Lord liveth, and as the soul liveth, as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And they two went on. He wouldn't refuse him. Verse 7. And 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood to view afar off. They knew what was about to happen. They knew they couldn't go, but they want to see. And they too stood by Jordan. In other words, they're on the little ridge above the Jordan, and they want to see what's happening. Verse 8. And Elijah took his mantle and wrapped it together and smote the waters. And they were divided hither and thither, so that they too went over on dry ground. Now, it's important that you note this. Elijah has a great deal to do with this generation. And as Moses took his staff and struck the waters, that's the legal, the law. The chief of all law, Moses, took the staff and parted the water. The prophet Elijah took the mantle of God and striking the water, parted it, being the spiritual leader and being very symbolic, in as much as Moses and Elijah would both appear in glorified bodies on the Mount of Transfiguration. And then you can begin to understand why that I feel very strongly the reason Satan couldn't find Moses' bones is that Moses was taken exactly as Elijah was. That's only my opinion, but I feel there is no other answer for it. But I feel also that there's a great meaning in it for you today. That spiritual mantle of the Elijah ministry, as it is written in Malachi chapter 4, that he would return, inasmuch as he had not died, that he would return and turn the hearts of the children back to the fathers, plural, meaning either to Satan, the spurious Messiah, or to the true Messiah and our Father, Yahweh. So you see, the parting of that water with that mantle states a great deal to you. It wasn't just because they needed to get across the pond. God could have picked him up anywhere. But there is a great message in it for you today, for it is only through that spiritual mantle, which would ultimately be Christ, that you could escape the captivity of the lies that Satan will pour out as a flood upon this earth, and in fact already has. It has begun. The controversy, the conflict, and the battle is well along its way. The rest of it's up to you. So there we go, verse 9. And it came to pass, when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, Ask what I shall do for thee before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And it's true that this was given because Elijah performed 8 miracles. Elisha will perform 16. What Elisha is doing here, because Elijah is basically his spiritual father. Understand my terminology. And by Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 17, he can claim a double portion, for Elijah certainly had no other children. But observe what Elijah states, verse 10. I'm sorry, not only a double portion, he wanted double what Elijah had, which would be his spiritual father. And if you think for a moment, understand what he's asking for here, because if you are a father and you have a set amount, and that's all you have, and your child asks for double what you've got, that's impossible. That can't be. A man can't give double what he doesn't have. Got the point? All right, important. Verse 10. And he said, What hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto thee, but if not, it shall not be so. What is Elijah saying? Now think about it a moment. It wasn't up to him. If God saw fit, only God could do it, because Elijah didn't have it to give. All right, you got it? A father couldn't give something he didn't have. Verse 11, and it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. It pulled in between them and parted them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Now, I need not paint any pictures or describe to you this fiery appearance as it is written. The color amber in Ezekiel chapter 1, you'll find is highly polished bronze. There's no big mystery to this. As a matter of fact, I have a tape the work titled Horses of the Bible. There's not. Our Father created this universe, and the laws of nature are His. In the simplicity in which He operates, it's no big deal for Him. It is for us. We're very crude. We still burn fossil fuel to get a little putt-putt to go, all right? It's true. Little fossil fuel, one storm or the other, a little putt-putt here and a putt-putt there. And there are powers that we have no knowledge of yet, but we will someday. So actually, God divided them and took Elijah. And how does a man that has never seen, you have lived in a time, you've seen jet engines and that propulsion, even though it is with fossil fuel. But they'd never seen hardly a chariot drawn by horses. So how are they going to describe it other than a whirling object? All right, so he did a pretty good job. Well, what will happen? Don't miss the next lecture. All right, bless your hearts. You listen a moment, won't you please?